Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Welcome to today's episode. We are so glad that you're joining us. We have a guest who we are really excited to introduce to you, and mostly because, well, we all have them. We all have a building, and Daniel Turner is an architect that actually works a lot in the early childcare space. And so we are excited to have him join us today, and we're going to talk about, well, a couple of different things. And I'm going to let Carrie lead a fair amount of this discussion because if you don't know from earlier conversations with us, Carrie had I can't even call it a brief spell, but, accidentally dipped her toe into real estate development and then fell in. And so there's definitely an episode or two on that. So if you are curious about Carrie's life in real estate development, come back and listen to those episodes. But today, Carrie and Daniel are going to talk about what you can do in your program as the owner. If you are the director listening to this, go find your owner and share this podcast episode with them. So with that, Carrie, start us out.
Okay, so I think let's we've got two frameworks that I want to make sure we hit, and we'll probably go down some other rabbit holes. We've already warned Daniel about our tendency to chase rabbits, but I definitely want you to tune in if you are interested in improving the curb appeal or I call it sex appeal of your building for an amount that you might be able to handle as far as the budget. And also if you're taking on an additional location or building from scratch. So those are the two I want to make sure we hit. So which is easier, building from scratch or doing a remodel, Dan?
Oh, goodness. Okay, Carrie, that's starting with a loaded question.
From an architect's perspective, we're not talking about my contractor background. From an architect's perspective.
From a design and construction design architecture perspective, yes, absolutely. And Kate, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate it. We have an architecture firm. My background is in architecture, but I am personally just a lead designer. But yes, we have been designing childcare facilities, early education since essentially 2004. Across multiple states, and it's been such a joy because it's a building type and a client type that's so unique, and the spaces are very special spaces because they have such an impact on such young lives. So to your question, I would say it's always easier to start with a blank slate on the building side because as you know, there's so many variables of unknowns with existing buildings, if it's a former retail center or, we're doing work with former churches and things like that. Those buildings all frequently come with a history that you just don't know much about. So when you have the opportunity, ground up is that blank slate, just wonderful way to get going.
Right, because then you can know the soil analysis and do everything from that point. You know that the walls aren't going to shift for at least a few years. I'm in Central Texas, so the walls are always moving, but we can get a few years in there with a new build. So if you're making the decision to do a new build, maybe you have a program and you're on 5 acres and you're like, oh, I could put another building. I'm now full and I've got a waiting list, or I'd like to have an infant toddler specific building. What are some things that someone needs to know when they're having the initial conversations to pick the right architect? What are some things that we need to have in that first couple of conversations?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And assuming you've already determined your site, like you have a building site, correct?
Yeah, they own the 5 acres. They're not entirely sure where on the 5 acres the second building's going to go, but it needs to be somewhere in this 5 acres because that's what I own.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's cool. So it sounds like you've got a program that's up and running and successful, and you have a a reputation in your community. So I would start by looking internally and say, what are the things that we're doing right as a childcare organization that we sort of want to partner with an architect, the things that we know we're doing right, some of our best practices, and then like our team would come in and have that sort of introduction and get to know your program a bit. But the variables, they're site variables. So what are the physical characteristics of the site? Like you said, Carrie, in Central Texas, obviously with the big drought swings that part of the country has, foundation work is important to get right. In other parts of the country like Ohio, you can't do construction in the winter because the ground is frozen. But consideration of the site is also important. We like to think about the outdoor learning environment as much as the indoor environment. So are there characteristics on that 5 acres? Like, are there some beautiful trees that we could position a playground under? What's the terrain like? I would say a lot of those questions around the site specific, availability of utilities, traffic flow, how are we going to keep the security between the 2 buildings for classroom flow back and forth. Just a lot of those questions.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So you need to have done a little bit of an inventory before you start interviewing architects so that you know where you're going, so that they can't come in and go, okay, what I want to build you is a McDonald's playscape. And you're like, no, I am a nature-based program and a McDonald's playscape is not going to work for me.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to scare away your existing, family and communities by doing something, a complete 180 of what's been successful for you in the past. So yeah, agreed 100%. And then also, there's sort of logistical issues with, are you in the city? What's the permitting process like in the city, or is it more of a rural site where there's less oversight with permitting, environmental issues like, is this facility going to be on septic, or do we have access to city sewer and things like that? So yeah, we like to do a whole bunch of groundwork before we even jump into the design process.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody actually earlier this morning, and they were saying, okay, I own this property, which is why this popped into my head, and they have a house on it, and they want to have a childcare program. And I was like, okay, are you wanting to have a registered program or a licensed program? Because they're like, I want to build it outside of my house. And I'm like, for zoning and building code and licensing code, it may need to be connected to the other building. So, and I know sometimes we get to that with covered walkways or other kinds of things like that. So how much should somebody expect the architect to know about the building code and the zoning, and how much should they get some outside help with that?
So I would say your architect would be your primary point of contact and knowledge base for those questions. The design team writ large, we usually include civil engineers, which focus on site design, some building engineers like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that work on the systems within the building. So it's really that entire design team. But when it comes to questions like building type, life safety, all of those, your architect is really the lead on that. But to go back to your first question, Carrie, what are the early considerations? I would say the biggest one is the B word, budget. So as an owner, as we're thinking about this second building, like, what is a budget number that you have in mind? Because we all know in this business that capital expenditures are all at a premium, and we want to be as careful as possible with the dollars that we're spending on the building, so we're not taking money away from other things. So something as simple as building a new building that connects to your existing school. Yes, there's positives to that, but there might also be negatives. Maybe that new connection pushes the new total building over a square footage that would require sprinklering for the whole building. So there's a cost that's associated with that. And that's not necessarily a negative, but some programs just, when you get to a big budget item like a sprinkler system, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, and it might trigger something else as far as zoning and stuff like that, because if you have a medium-sized center, you can be in this zoning, and if you have a large center, you have to be in a different zoning. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's say that they come back to you and the budget answer is not with enough zeros. And so instead, what we're going to have to do is that whole remodeling, reworking the existing program to have more. So maybe we have a different issue. So we have a different program and they don't have enough zeros in their budget because.
And now, is that 1 0 or 2?
Well, we're going to presume they have at least, they're at least above 10,000. Because I think if you're doing anything where you're going to need an architect, if you're trying to do that for $2,000, you're going to have a really hard time making that work financially because you've got to pay the architect and you've got to have the ability to implement. So if we've got a program where maybe the demographics of the neighborhood has shifted and it was a program that was a great program in the early 2000s and there was a lot of, I don't know, cutesy stuff, and the neighborhood has maybe changed and now they need to pivot to a Spanish language immersion program because now the neighborhood dynamics have changed. And so having Sesame Street characters on the wall or things like that no longer speaks to the clientele in the neighborhood. What are some of the things that they could work with you on if they needed to change the age groups they were working on, or they needed to pivot for a different demographic?
Yeah, and that's more often the case. It's basically you're talking about like a refresh, like a classroom refresh, or maybe even an atrium or sort of welcoming space refresh. I think one of a really smart thing to do, and again, getting back to the dollars of it, if you can kind of budget in annually some money for refresh of things, I think that's so important because we all know that paint is cheap, right? But planning the time to shut down a classroom and get the people in there and do that work, I mean, all that takes there's some steps in there that you need to kind of work through. And we love that so much. We love being able to walk into a school that's healthy and happy, and you see children playing, but then you look around and you're like, it's just a little dingy, or the lighting is just a little bit off. Some of those things are such easy fixes. Like some of them are as easy as changing out the type of light bulbs that you have in your existing fixtures, right? To get more light, or some of them is repositioning a classroom that makes better use of the natural light. We're a big fan of windows and getting natural light into classrooms, because children aren't mushrooms, so they need access to natural light to grow. So some of those classroom refreshes, maybe they include, knocking out a portion of a wall and adding a window. And that sounds daunting, but if we take it step by step, maybe it's not so bad.
Okay, I had this whole vision. All of a sudden, everybody needs to have those little mushroom toadstools on their playgrounds, because I'm sorry, I just immediately went, oh, look, we're all now, isn't that a video game? Those little mushrooms? Some Mario game or something, but I don't know. I just envisioned all these white mushrooms with red tops and polka dots. I'm sorry, I go ahead.
That's for another show, I think.
Yeah. I'd not heard that phrase before, and so it took me by surprise, and I was like, that is true. They are not mushrooms. They are not little, okay. Anyway.
Yeah,
okay,
they need vitamin D and they need light, so we want to give it to them.
So things that are in that, we're not spending all of the zeros. You talked about paint. You talked about changing out lighting, either light fixtures or light bulbs, and maybe adding a window or changing it from a window that has divided light to a window that has single light. So, okay. Those are something, is there anything we should do to the outside of the building other than paint it to help with that refresh, that, getting more in line with the current clientele?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, as you turn into that parking lot, it's all about first impressions, right? So, is my landscaping tidy? Is the parking lot clean? Is there good visibility to the entrance of the school? I mean, sometimes it can be as simple as some site, wayfinding signage, like entrance this way, maybe with your logo. Just make it look as welcoming and inviting as possible, and make the ability to find that front door easy and bright. Do I have window treatments over the front windows, classroom windows, that might be making the school look like it's not open and vibrant from the street? There's just little simple things. We think about these buildings just during the day, but I mean, we just went through the time change. So at night, at pickup time in a good part of the country, between 5 and 6 p.m., it's rather dark outside. So are there some landscape lighting strategies I might be able to employ that make my building look better, but then also make that evening pickup safer?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I really do. Because I mean, like, I never really thought about the night lighting, but yesterday or day before yesterday, I don't know, I had something I had to go do at 6 o'clock, and I like went outside and went, wow, it's really, really dark. And yes, I'm in a space that has, the auto, security lighting, but that's not very attractive. So yeah, so that's a great reminder of don't forget this piece. And especially with all the solar options now, it doesn't necessarily, you can put lighting just about anywhere.
Well, and you were talking before about if you have this awesome tree, putting some uplighting in that tree to highlight as people are driving by. Look, we got cool trees. This is a fun, comfortable place to bring your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have power out there already, I mean, that's a $50 change. That's essentially an in-ground light socket change. And Kate, like you said, a lot of those options are solar. So even if you don't have power, there's things you can do out there. Yeah. I just think, like, always approaching your school, whether you're an owner or an administrator, or a teacher, even, always approaching your school and your classroom as a way of, if this were my home, what are the things that I might do to make people feel more comfortable and feel like they're more welcome here? Does it look like we try to keep our home, guests are coming over, so we think about, like, let's tidy up the living room or whatever. I think if you have that mindset of your school and your classroom, then you're going to bring that level of attention to the building every day, into the space.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to circle back. You were talking a little bit about the safety concerns. You talked about it both when we were adding the second building to the program that's doing gangbusters, and when we were talking about doing the refresh of the building. And I think that's not something that those of us in leadership think about on a day-to-day basis. Like, we might think about it once a month when we do our fire drill. Or once a quarter when we're doing our lockdown drill, but we don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. From a design perspective, what are some things that we can do to help keep the kids healthy and safe? To touch on Kate's, US Green Building concept, keeping the kids healthy in the space and safe in the space.
And you're speaking, Carrie, more from an environmental point of view, or more from like a social, like a threat point of view?
So the safety, I'm thinking sort of the getting the kids in and out of the building safely, but I guess also hardening the building from people who shouldn't be in the building. I guess that is a relevant question. I hate to think about that, because the fact that anybody would want to hurt kids just makes me sick to my stomach. But it's something we have to think about.
Well, I would say one thing is, and as architects and design professionals, we're always sort of getting pushback from clients on some design feature. Well, not always, but sometimes we have such robust building codes in this country, and for a reason. You know, the building codes are in place to make sure primarily that people are safe from fire, from whatever. You're comfortable, that the building is built correctly, and that it's built to be a facility that is long term and has, you know, is responsible to the environment. It's not wasting energy. It's as efficient as reasonably possible. So I think because children spend, especially young children, I mean, we're talking about children as young as 6 weeks, right? Really, all of their physical needs need to be made up by someone other than themselves. So
Right.
that's the teacher and the caregiver. So the building has to be sort of that third teacher, if you will, which is providing physical comfort, not too hot, not too cold, access to natural light, quality ventilation. And I know, Kate, you have a big background in this. Being really intentional with the finishes we select in the building. You know, paints, low VOC paints, non-vinyl based flooring. There's a lot of those selections that you can make that don't really have a negative effect on the budget if you're just being intentional and putting that at front of mind. So I would say on the interior, thinking about the finishes, and we've got some resources on our website, and I think you guys do as well, and we're happy to share those. Thinking about the materials that children are interacting with every day, because if I'm a toddler and I'm still, you know, walking and crawling, I'm going to spend a lot more time on the floor than you know, us adults. And a lot of teachers, good teachers especially, are right down there with the children. So thinking about those materials on the inside of the building is super important. On the outside of the building, as you go from one building to two, now you're thinking of like, what are my secure areas now are not just within the building and the playground, but it's now within the two buildings, the extended playgrounds, and how do you create that level of security that doesn't look, frankly, like a prison from the street, right? We still want our school to look welcoming and
Yes.
Inviting, but we have to provide that level of protection in worst case scenarios. So I think like planning, like working out in your mind how are children exiting the building safely in like you said, a fire drill or the monthly drills, and then how are they interacting with the less secure parts of the site, the parking lot, the neighborhood, and everything beyond.
Okay, well, I think that helps a lot. And you know, you talked about the lighting and the access points into the building. And again, I'm hoping that you guys listening are going, oh yeah, I hadn't even thought about access into the building since we put in the keypad on the front door, and now I don't need to think about it because there's a keypad on the front door. But there's more than one door into your building because there's more than one door out of your building. And as they said in the Avengers, doors work both ways. Now Kate's just laughing hysterically.
I love the reference.
I'm pretty sure that is said a lot of other places.
No. It's just Hawkeye. Hawkeye's the only one who's ever said it. That's the way it is.
Like, not sure I agree, Carrie.
Samuel L. Jackson seemed completely surprised that doors worked both ways. I'm just saying.
I've got lots of people in my world who think that. Anyway, I will not go there today. So.
Okay, so since everybody's now giggling, okay, so we've gotten to a point where somebody's like, okay, I've got a budget for refresh. I've got, you know, I'm buying or building another school. How do they decide who is a good architect for them? That's my last real question here.
Yeah, no, I like
or
that
designer, or a designer.
Or design. Yeah, because you know, a lot of times, like an interior refresh, depending on the level of that, if you're not moving any walls around or really affecting, like we were talking about, the way that you move throughout the space, if it's just cosmetic, you know, you could there's so many DIY resources online. I hate to say it, but you don't necessarily even need to call us for that. Like, TikTok might be a good source for that. But yeah, I think I would say do your homework. There's a reason that we've focused on early education projects for, like I said, about 20 years now, is because they're complicated little buildings, right? And people don't always think about that, because if you're designing a home, or you're designing, I don't know, a hospital or something like that, most of those bodies are kind of the same size. But these buildings specifically attend to the need of tiny infants through really robust moving around, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds if you have an after-school program. So yeah, I would say do your homework, and just a lot of it is also how do you meld with that group or person? Like, how does your program meld with the thinking of that group, with the designer, architect, or whomever? Make sure your goals are aligned, and then just be realistic with budgeting and timing. I can't tell you the permitting process varies so much from state to state, region to region. Yeah. I mean, we've had school projects.
Even in the
city
same municipality, you can have, are you county or not county? Are you city or are you not city? I mean, we're in Central Texas, where literally you can have a school district, a county, like you could be so confused you don't really know where you are, let alone exactly who do you have to get what permits from. So we had that.
Stop talking about the Windy Hill project.
No, I'm talking about my own electric issues. Like, so our own electric issues, we had to work with both the city of Austin and Pedernales Electric, and we're in Williamson County. So we had, like, it was just a nightmare. I was really glad somebody else got to do that.
Well, and Kate, like you have to check the boxes for all of those entities. Mm-hmm. Like, if one of them is outstanding, it really shuts down everything. So I think it's important as you're planning this new facility or refresh or addition, do some research. You definitely want somebody with experience and that understands all those moving parts of the different. And we haven't even talked about state licensing, like ratios and outdoor space requirements. All those things vary, again, state by state. So it's important to do that homework as well.
You brought up a great point, and hopefully those who are listening listen all the way through, because one of the things that we strongly encourage folks who work with us to do is, before you do anything, call that licensing rep and get their input, because you're building that relationship and you're asking them for advice. Now, don't ask them for advice and do absolutely nothing, because then you're just kind of sticking your nose up at the advice they gave you. But if you are doing something internally or cosmetic, that's what your quality improvement mentors are for. That's what those state licensing reps are for. Include them in the process, and, take your time. If you're going to put the money into it, definitely take your time and make sure you're doing it right. And this is not about, let's do them all for like $5,000 and do it ourselves. Is it better off doing it 1 or 2 rooms at a time, buying quality products, and really understanding, this is where that green building part of me, understanding the glues, the paints. Do you have time for that stuff to off gas? Because you don't really want to add fumes and everything that goes with that to the kids' chaotic day already. Like, if you've moved them out of a space and then you gave them stinky stuff to smell, you're gonna have a bad day. So
they're gonna be crabby. They're gonna be crabby.
I mean, I'd be crabby if I had to, smell stinky stuff and not be able to tell you it's bothering me, right? So kids get headaches, adults get headaches. We don't always identify it as being the off gas of glues, paints, even cleaning your carpets. I mean, some of this stuff really can set kids off. I'm sorry, I rabbit holed again. Go ahead, Carrie.
No, I think it's good information for the director or owner who is listening, is that whole involving people in the decision-making process and keeping licensing in mind. Daniel was absolutely right to go, oh, don't forget licensing.
Right.
But so that schedule, okay, great, you're under enrolled and you're like, oh, so I can go ahead and start working on this other classroom and retrofitting it for infants because nothing's happening in there. But the smells of the paint and the noise of the demo and the randomness of when a plumber will show up.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Right.
even the glues and stuff that plumbers use. I mean, it's not like a plumber isn't going to come with smells. I mean, they
Yep.
come for smells, but they are also going to make smells if you're having them put in new toilets or new sinks because they got to put that stuff around the pipes. There we go.
Yes,
Yeah.
the purple glue.
The purple glue. Yeah, I mean, I
knew what I
that's
meant.
such a-
The stuff.
Yeah, that's such a great strategy that asking that question ahead of time, because then I think that licensing person feels invested. They feel like a stakeholder, right? So when the project goes forward, or you start implementing that, then they feel like they've been actively involved in that. But yeah, the spaces that surround us, they affect us psychologically. I mean, in ways that we know consciously. Like we can walk into a stinky classroom and be like, "Oh, this classroom is stinky," and then subconsciously, like in ways that I think that we can't count on. So just being really aware of that is important.
Well, yes, and we could get into the whole color theory piece as well. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things when you're doing all of this, and Carrie and I should be better about this by now, but just remember your educational philosophy as a program. So if you are fun, that's going to have a different feel than if you're Montessori or Waldorf or nurture.
Are you saying that Montessori and Waldorf aren't fun? They can absolutely be fun. Don't
Okay.
listen to her, guys. Don't listen to her.
Know your educational philosophy and what people are going to expect to see.
Yes,
Right.
in the Waldorf or the Montessori, they're going to expect a lot of wood and a lot of baskets.
Yes.
So
That's right.
if you
And the
have a lot of
the
plastic
color,
bits, it's going to confuse people.
And a very more
Yeah,
and a more muted earth tone palette color. So that's where I'm saying, don't put these kind of colors.
Kate's pointing at our books because we are all about fun and obnoxious and in your face. And so all of our books have very bright colors.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've gone on a little longer than we normally do, but I want to make sure that Daniel gets a chance to tell people where they can find him. Where's the best place for somebody to see examples of your work and to reach out to you if they would like to work with you?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, our website, danielscottturner.com, is the best resource for us. And we've got we have a mini blog format there where we've got some resources. So if you want to go look at some of our past projects, like I said, we've been in the childcare early education field since 2004. So we've got work a lot in Texas because we're based in Houston, but Ohio, Oregon, New Jersey, Florida. Yeah, it's so much fun, and don't be intimidated about the process because like anything, the first step is usually the hardest, and as long as you've got a plan and some good partners moving forward, that's the way to do it. You can do it.
Well, that sounds great. And Daniel, we'll definitely make sure that we include some of those links in our show notes, especially the ones that are related to what we talked about. And if there's anything additional that you want us to share with our listeners, we also send out a newsletter. So if you are listening to this and you are not on our podcast newsletter list, make sure that you let us know. We usually include some of those links in our podcast newsletter as well. So with that, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us today. We'll definitely have you on. We got a whole list of topics that we didn't get anywhere close to. So we'll probably have you on again. Wink, wink. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I'll check with my co-host. And with that co-host, what are you going to do?
So if you liked the show, share it with other people who need to know, and definitely go in and write a review so that other people know that there's fun to be had in this podcast and a little bit of learning along with it.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.